An attack on the Kursk region could deprive Europe of the last remnants of Russian gas. Gas shortages in countries like Austria and Slovakia could become a problem for all of Europe. As in 2022, the seemingly subsiding Hunger Games could begin again. The fight for scarce resources could lead to the further disintegration of unified markets. The European energy market continues to undergo forced stress tests related to the Special Military Operation, SMO. Fighting near the Sudzha gas metering station, GMS, in the Kursk region recently caused gas prices to spike above $490 per thousand cubic meters. Prices have since dropped and are now fluctuating between $450 and $480, which is still significantly higher than July levels of $400 to $420. The market was somewhat calmed by the fact that gas, despite ongoing clashes, continues to flow through the pipeline. However, supplies could be cut off at any moment. The volatility is driven by fears that the Sudzha GMS equipment could be damaged. This would make it impossible to account for the gas passing through Ukraine and would likely lead to the cessation of transit. The alternative gas supply route, through the Sokhranovka GMS in the Luhansk region, was halted by Kyiv in May 2022, citing force majeure, Ukraine's loss of control over the territory where the GMS is located. Since then, Gazprom has been consistently pumping gas through the only remaining route at a rate of about 40 million cubic meters per day, meeting the needs of Austria, Slovakia, and partially Italy. Austria would suffer the most from a supply stoppage, as it still receives the majority of its Russian gas through the Ukrainian pipeline. Despite a significant reduction in gas supplies from Russia since 2022, Vienna met 64% of its needs through Gazprom in 2023. On August 13, Austria's Ministry of Energy sounded the alarm, warning of the enormous risk of a sudden halt in Russian gas supplies, which are critical to the functioning of the country's export-oriented heavy industry. As long as there is dependence on Russian gas supplies, there is a huge risk of corresponding supply disruptions with far-reaching consequences. We must end Austria's dependence as soon as possible, the ministry said in a statement. The alarmist rhetoric from Austria's Ministry of Energy sharply contrasts with statements made by the same body just 6 months ago. In February, Austrian Minister of Energy and Environment Leonor Gewessler stressed the need to accelerate the diversification of gas supplies, requiring Austrian companies to take specific measures to reduce the share of Russian gas in their purchases. This included the need to terminate the contract between Austria's largest energy company, OMV, and Gazprom, which is in effect until 2040. Although these supplies are not under EU sanctions, the current Austrian leadership, despite continuing large-scale purchases of Russian gas, has felt pressure from Brussels. In September 2023, Austrian Chancellor Karl Nehammer even stated that purchasing Russian gas is morally unpleasant but necessary to ensure the country's energy security. The Austrians were able to both criticize Russia and continue buying its gas due to one important factor: time. The Austrian leadership had planned to completely phase out aggressive gas by 2027 to 2028. This was to be achieved through the much-touted energy transition and by establishing alternative supplies through Italy and Germany. While the prospects for a sharp increase in the share of green energy in Austria's and the EU's overall energy balance remain unclear, American LNG supplies have indeed replaced a significant volume of Russian gas that has left the market. However, the partners proved unreliable. In January of this year, the Biden administration suspended the issuance of new permits for LNG exports. The existing flows reach Europe only in a trickle, considering that much more successful Asian markets are also competing for the same volume of gas. Nevertheless, the continued flow of pipeline gas through Ukraine provided Europeans and Austria in particular with the much-needed time to resolve their energy supply issues. Kyiv's decision not to renew the transit contract, which expires at the end of 2024, seemed to reduce this time to a minimum. However, even this problem was quickly resolved by convincing Ukraine to continue gas transit without a contract based on preliminary applications and with European intermediaries. Especially since the transit brings Ukraine an extra $1 billion a year. An attack by the Ukrainian armed forces on the Kursk region could deprive Europeans of the time they so desperately need. The blame for this would fall not so much on Ukraine as on Europe itself. The de facto attack by a NATO proxy army on Russia's sovereign and recognized territory raises the question of a complete severance of economic relations. In this context, previous compromises, including direct energy supplies, seem increasingly untenable. Russia's losses from not supplying gas to Europe no longer seem critical, as its market share in the EU has dropped from a once record 40% to just 8%. The country is actively redirecting its gas supplies to Asian, Middle Eastern, and other markets. However, for several European countries, including Austria, a sudden halt in gas supplies could have catastrophic consequences. A gas shortage in countries like Austria and Slovakia would become a problem for all of Europe. As in 2022, the seemingly subsiding Hunger Games could begin again. The fight for scarce resources could lead to the further disintegration of unified markets, weakening the ties within the European Union. Europe, lacking both strategy and objectives in its current confrontation with Russia, continues to punish itself.